We have been spending a wonderful week in the Las Perlas Islands, just off the Pacific coast of Panama. We have had the place virtually to ourselves, which isn't always what we want. But it's nice to just have the boat and nature as our company. But this morning we need to sail back to Panama City, quite the opposite of this place, so that Nushta can catch a flight home. She hasn't been home in over a year, and has a wedding to attend, so this was a good opportunity. Okay, we're almost ready to go. Leaving Las Perlas here in a minute. Nushta's just finishing up, getting the boat ready over there. And I am checking our charts so we can get out of here safely. I think we're going to make a cut through here instead of going around to the north and then down. So I just got to mark this point, these 2 points on my chart, so I have something to follow, because my charts don't do a great job of highlighting that. The navionics charts aren't very good for this part of the world, but like basically every other cruiser out here, we have our Bauhaus book with detailed soundings that we cross-reference all the time. The weather was good as we got underway. There wasn't any wind, but we were in good spirits nonetheless.
Very attractive there. I hope the wind comes up.
Well, this is fun.
Motoring. We love that.
Motoring.
That's why we have a sailboat.
That's why we have a sailboat. Tarka has spent 2 years in the trade winds, where we could reliably count on a 15-knot breeze out of the east almost every day. But here, basically where the ITCZ begins and stretches across the Pacific Ocean, the weather has been far less predictable, and today was no different. Tarka doesn't have radar, and even if it did, I don't think it would be that much help for a squall that we were heading for. What has worked for us in the past is, if possible, let the squall pass, or alter course if we can determine a route that will avoid it. If that isn't feasible, then we'll try to gauge whether we're in for a blow or not by looking to see if the rain is coming down straight up and down, or being blown horizontally out in front. Our biggest concern being wind, followed maybe by lightning. It looked to us to be mainly a rain event.
Huh?
The rain is feeling really cold now. The water is so flat.
There?
Yeah.
How come?
I don't know what happened. It feels quite good to be drenched in a tropical downpour, and Tarka appreciates it too, I think. It's not like she ever gets the luxury of being hosed down. I'm not sure if this little Martin appreciated the rain as much as we did, though, as he took refuge on our jib sheets. But we need that jib sheet.
Good to see life. Oh no! Oh, he was already like acting like he's gonna fall.
A breeze had started to pick up after the rain ceased, and we were tired of the engine that had now been running for several hours.
What's it been going? 4 knots without the engine? That's good.
A little bit less than 4 knots.
More wind.
Average 4.7.
Okay.
Still 25 miles to go. Not halfway. We couldn't quite decide on how we wanted to sail, though. The wind was a little variable and more or less pointing straight from astern. I tried setting us up wing on wing and went forward to rig a boom preventer, which ideally prevents us from getting bonked on the head or damaging the rig if we inadvertently jibe. But it didn't feel right, so I put us on a broad reach instead. The jib was luffing though, and I knew we could make better time if we could just run straight downwind in these conditions. As I went to set our jib, I had noticed that our tiller pilot wasn't holding our course, and had us on a gradual turn to port. At this point, I noticed we're off course, and reached down to the autopilot to correct, but it was too late. It was very lucky that I caught the sail starting to back at that moment, because a second later would have meant a very bad head injury for Nushta, or possibly worse. Luckily, we do have a spare tiller pilot on the boat, and Nushta went down to retrieve it. Even though we have the wind vane, I still believe that our tiller pilots are some of the most important pieces of equipment on the boat. This is the first time one of them has actually failed us, and they have otherwise been reliable and effective. Except this one has been stowed away for a long time.
This one has its own issues.
And clearly needs its connectors cleaned. With our steering issue fixed, we finally just got to enjoy the sail back to Panama City. And, maybe for our suffering, we were fairly compensated by a visit from a pod of dolphins. We anchored before sunset and we got the boat cleaned up and the sails packed away. This is always a chore that I actually relish. It means that whatever may have transpired on a trip, even as short as the one today, we made it to where we were going and in one piece, and Tarka deserves some love for helping making that happen.
Beautiful sunset and you're with your funny faces.
As we were being treated to a spectacular sunset, our friend Ben, who recently transited the canal, came up beside us and told us about a storm that hit the anchorage while we were in one of the islands, and how they had a near miss with a dragging boat. Let's just say there might be some foreshadowing there. But this evening, Nustra and I were a little distracted. After 2.5 years, we have decided to sell Tarka. And today was one of Tarka's last sails with us on board. Trust me, this wasn't an easy decision to make, so let me try to explain. I know the plan was to sail around the world, but to be frank, when I first started this adventure, I knew nothing about sailing apart from what I had read in books or absorbed through YouTube. And well, I learned a lot of things the hard way. My eyes had always been set on the Pacific from day one, but it just took time to build confidence. And time, especially on a boat with no real income, is money. But it's frankly not just about the money. For me, life threw me some pretty tough curveballs on this trip that ultimately made me reevaluate my priorities. While Nustra and I were giving Tarka a refit in preparation for the Pacific crossing, you may remember that my dad died suddenly, and that was the only time I've been home in the last few years. After that episode, I didn't talk much more about it. However, I think it's important to talk about, not just because of how it plays into the difficult decision to sell Tarka, but because it's a topic that isn't talked about quite enough. My dad took his own life. I was devastated because I didn't even know he was struggling, and maybe I would have been more keyed in had I not been so out of touch. I don't think there's anything I could have done, but I definitely could have been more present. Out here I'm so absorbed in this adventure, off the grid and only occasionally on Wi-Fi, that it's just the default to be MIA for the people you love. In some ways it felt like I had abandoned a lot of people that were important to me, and there are real consequences to that. Nusha and I don't have the fiscal or practical luxury to get on a plane and go visit the people we love very often. And once that Pacific crossing starts, it will likely be a year before I see any of my friends or family again. I just don't think I can do that right now. Later, maybe, but not now. We discussed putting Tarka on the hard and returning to her later, but I also can't let Tarka sit and wait for me. Boats fall into disrepair so quickly that way, especially in the tropics. She deserves to continue her voyage around the world, so selling her seemed like the best choice. So this was a big day, and this sunset is Nushta's last on Tarka. She'll fly home tomorrow, and I will soon sail Tarka up to a marina further up the coast where she can safely wait until we find a buyer.
I'm still on the boat, so the disc is gonna stay. You're not gonna take it up.
You got it.
Nope.
Won't be Dutch crew on the boat anymore.
Nope.
The next few weeks after Nusha left were a bit of a daze. I hadn't been alone on Tarka for over a year, and it was a strange feeling, as if a part of the boat itself was missing. I had started to record some boat chores in a monologue format that I don't usually do.
So I've been trying to debug one of our autopilots. We got these two tiller pilots is actually what they are. And one of them is more powerful than the other, and the other one was kind of a backup that I got when I first bought the boat. With
Maybe it's just an excuse for me to talk to myself. I definitely wasn't myself for a little while. In any case, I did manage to fix our tiller pilots. The weather has been turbulent, to say the least. I try to leave the boat in the morning to run any errands, so that I'm back aboard for the late afternoon thunderstorms that build almost on a daily basis. I keep an eye on these because the holding here is known to be not very good. And if Tarka drags anchor, it could be a really bad day. Lightning is also a real concern. I know more than one boat that has recently had their boat struck by lightning here, or on the other side of Panama in San Blas. Ooh. Sometimes the storms look really scary and make a lot of noise.
I think things are about to get pretty interesting.
But when they arrive, it ends up just being really wet.
But so far, it's actually not that bad. But I better touch some wood or knock on wood. It just seems to be raining, a little bit of wind, but nothing crazy.
Sometimes they strike at night, or taunt me with a light show from a distance, making it difficult to sleep. I don't dare go to bed without setting an anchor alarm. But eventually, my luck ran out. This one on the face of it didn't seem so bad.
So it looks like we're being hit by the outflow of a pretty big thunderstorm that must have been went out there and fell apart, because I don't think it's going to rain very hard, but it sure has gotten windy.
But there was something about it that made me nervous. Like, I had never seen such a large group of birds just being blown around like that before. At this point, the wind had started gusting to 30 to 35 knots. And moments after I stopped filming, the anchorage was hit with 50 to 60 knots of sustained wind from a seaward direction. I stopped filming to start the engine and prepared to fight to stay on the anchor. Unfortunately, it was really no use, and Tarka began to drag. The waves were also building to a short and choppy 4 to 5 feet, which complicated matters. I came within 10 feet of another boat, and all I could think of was, how am I going to pay for all this damage? But luckily, with full throttle on the engine, I was able to keep my distance from other boats until the wind subsided, and I could pick the camera up once again. The anchorage was chaos. And so was Tarka down below. Things were not secured, as I didn't expect to be in a sea state here in the anchorage. Other boats in the anchorage were not as lucky as Tarka.
That's bad.
Because we dragged and were now very close to our neighbors, I relocated Tarka, and like it seems to go with these storms, was treated to the most spectacular sunset.
Okay, well, it's been a few hours. Oh, well, that was an absolute shit show. Tarka has never dragged before, and we dragged pretty good here. I don't know if we dragged about 50 to 100 feet and then the anchor hooked, or if I don't know what happened, or maybe the water got shallower, or maybe it got into some better holding. But eventually it held, but that was only after the winds had died down a little bit. But man, that storm was probably the most intense storm I've seen in the 2 years I've had Tarka. The winds were, I don't have a wind gauge, so I'm just guessing on other times I've seen high winds, and in Colombia we saw 50 to 60 knot gust sometimes. And I think this was about 50 knots sustained. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, it was strong. It was probably, the gusts were probably 70 knots. It was crazy. The swell built up to probably really short, steep 5 feet waves, and in an anchorage that's not a lot of fun. And luckily the engine works great, because I was able to keep the boat pointed. We're kind of where the chain, where I thought the anchor was, and into the waves and wind, and I amazingly didn't hit my neighbor. But I came extremely close, and there were moments where I was like, this is it, and I dove in for the fenders, and I looked at him, and he's just trying to take care of his own boat, and I don't know, I just was like thinking ahead, like, what am I gonna do? This is it. This is the end of Tarka. But it worked out. Eventually the wind died down, and then much later the waves died down, and I picked up the anchor and I relocated. And I haven't really had a chance to set the anchor because the wind keeps changing direction, but I'm okay. Tarka's okay for now. I cleaned up the mess inside the boat. Still got to organize a bunch of stuff that fell down, but Oh, I don't know. I need a beer and I don't have any.
I decided I didn't want to take any more chances in this anchorage and soon charted a course over to Vista Mar, some 40 miles along the coast. There is a small marina there that should offer some protection and make things a lot easier when it comes to selling the boat. Got my coffee here. The sun's just about coming up. I think I'm going to go ahead and get the sail up, get things ready to go, and we'll be on my way. I can't say I'm going to miss the city all that much. Maybe it's unfair that my opinions have been shaped by the foul weather here, but I also feel very similar to how I felt in Martinique, like I didn't really belong. It's a slow life on the boat, and the cities are always bustling. It's been a nice convenience though, that's for sure.
Okay, so I'm still motoring for a couple of reasons. First one is that, well, there's not a lot of wind yet. So I think if we tried sailing only, we'd only be doing about 3.5 knots. The other reason is we're approaching the Pacific Panama Canal entrance and the anchorage as well for the big ships. And I don't think they like it when you sail through the anchorages. I mean, we did it on the Atlantic side, but they definitely don't like you sailing if you're going to be inside the channel, which we will have to cross in order to go where we're going. So I've just heard stories of other people getting yelled at by the police. Police boat comes up and yells at them. So I'm just going to keep the main sail up and keep motor sailing here until we get past that, and then we'll see what the winds are doing.
There wasn't a lot of wind, but there was enough to get us to where we needed to be before sunset, and I was happy to just sail with the engine off. This is my last sail on Tarka, the last leg of our voyage. In some ways it is so tempting to just turn west and point to the Marquesas. We could be there in 4 weeks at this speed, but I would also probably die of starvation, unless I got my fishing game together. Eventually the wind started to stiffen up a bit and Tarka dug in. I decided to reef the Jenny a little since we were only heeling more but not going any faster. Plus it helps balance the tiller out a bit.
Vista Marina, this is the sailing vessel Tarka.
Yeah, Vista Marina over.
Vista Marina, this is the sailing vessel Tarka.
Okay, standby Soylent 1. I am come back the call.
Okay, standing by 7-1.
Tarka has only been at a marina once during this entire voyage, and docking her always gives me anxiety. So I'm just hoping for light winds, lots of help on the dock, and plenty of space. This marks the end of the trip for me on Tarka. Tied up now, I will spend the coming weeks preparing everything to get the boat sold. It's a quiet place on the Panamanian coast. And I don't know if I've mentioned it already, but the tides are huge down here. Also, I definitely didn't escape the storms by coming up here.
That could get interesting.
But at least now we're safely tied up behind a breakwater. Even here I have friends. It seems like everywhere you go on a sailboat, you have friends. And Panama does funnel all those westward Caribbean boats into one spot. Diane was here when I arrived. She's a French single-handed sailor on a boat about the same size as Tarka. We're definitely a rare breed out here. And though my voyage is ending, the longest voyage of hers is just about to begin as she sets off towards Tahiti today. She was making final preparations for her boat as I came by to distract her with a visit.
Okay. Are you ready to help me to go backwards?
I'm ready for you. You just tell us when you're ready.
The Marquesas are 4,000 or so miles in the direction she's pointing. And at the speeds our little boats go, it'll take her at least 4 or 5 weeks to get to the Marquesas. Possibly shorter if she gets lucky with a good current, and maybe longer if she gets caught in the doldrums too long as she crosses into the South Pacific. But I know she'll make it. I do hope Tarka will follow in her wake at some point. Not with me, though. Tarka has been sold, and I'm flying back to the States tonight. She's been thoroughly cleaned and organized. My bags are packed, and all that's left to do is just a final walk down.
So this is it. These are my very last moments here on the boat. In many ways, it's a good thing to move on to the next adventure in life. But it's also been pretty difficult because even if it's only been 2 years, those 2 years to me have seemed like a lot longer, because every moment has been difficult or challenging or interesting or beautiful in some way, and as a result I have so many different memories of those 2 years that it feels like the previous 8 years of my life leading up to it, even though it's a shorter time. I don't know, it's a strange way our memory works like that. But it's difficult to say goodbye. And I'll miss the boat and everything it's brought me in my life.
Honestly, this was hard for me.
Yeah.
I know it's just a boat, but it's a boat that has been my entire existence for the last few years of my life. It has taken me to so many incredible places, introduced me to amazing people and lifelong friends, showed me the value and importance of our underwater world, and absolutely challenged me every step of the way. I wouldn't trade it for anything.